"Are you selling your daughter or just one of your cows?" Duke Edgar Collins asked the over-eager mother standing before him. "I beg your pardon," she replied in shock, holding her bachelorette daughter's arm as the other party guests looked in their direction. The Duke took a sip of his wine. "I've told you already that I'm not interested in discussing marriage, and yet you continue to force your disgusting daughter upon me. You must be expecting a big payday if you're so adamant about matching us up." The Duke had already been bombarded with 3 proposals that evening, and his patience was dry. He may have been the most eligible bachelor in town, but he was a man of principle and was disgusted by desperate mothers begging him to marry their daughters as if they were farm animals. The mother clutched her necklace tightly. "Duke Edward, I would never. The mere accusation is appalling. Forgive me, but we were under the impression that you were on the market again." Duke Edgar raised his eyebrow as he scanned the circle of women who had surrounded him as he arrived at Baron Desmond's party. "And what fool told you that?" he asked. The mother's cheeks turned red as she looked to the floor in embarrassment. "We heard it from His Royal Highness himself. The king said he couldn't wait for you to have a duchess by your side." Duke Edgar felt the vein in his neck throb at the mention of the king. Though His Highness had a grander title, the Duke owned nearly as much land as the monarch. Their friendly rivalry over the years included the spreading of many rumors, and this was no exception. "I see. Well, let me save you all from further disappointment. With all due respect, I'd rather marry my than any of you. I bid you a good evening." Duke Edgar turned to the nearby window as he finished his drink. Embarrassment washed over the mother and her daughter, as a number of the other overzealous women took their leave from Edgar's side. They knew there would be no charming the elusive Duke tonight. As they scattered, whispers buzzed in the air. "For the best, I heard he's a real rat," one of the offended women said. "His business dealings are so hush-hush. I heard he's even working with criminals in the cover of night," gossiped another. The women focused their attention elsewhere as the Duke finally found himself alone. Duke Edgar was the only son of his father and the sole heir of countless lands. He lived like a king, and thanks to his connection to the king himself, nothing was impossible for Edgar. He was said to be a cunning and dangerous man, feared by many, respected by all. But once he inherited his father's empire, the townsfolk were willing to look past their fears. "Duke Collins is here," a young woman whispered to her companion as they entered the party, having just missed his angry tirade. "It's going to be a miserable evening," Edgar sighed. He felt like he was trapped in a viper's nest, with all these mothers looking to bag a son-in-law. Edgar had no idea why he agreed to attend the Baron's party. The Baron, Desmond Barrett, was a man he never cared for. Desmond's own empire was crumbling, and Edgar couldn't figure out why a man on the brink of bankruptcy would throw such an elaborate party. Was the man looking to speed up being kicked out of his own home? "Duke Collins," the man himself appeared. The Baron approached Edgar with his hair tied into his usual ponytail. He shook the Duke's hand excitedly, bowing deeply as he did. "It's an honor to have you here, Your Grace." Edgar was used to having his constituents suck up to him, but that didn't mean he enjoyed it. "Baron," he greeted the man coldly. "It was so kind of you to visit my home, to attend our little soirée," Desmond said, pleasantly surprised to see the Duke. He was clearly a nervous wreck, desperate for the evening to go off without a hitch. Desmond made sure to spread the news the Duke would be at his party. "Save it, Baron. You know why I am here. Unlike the king, I am not convinced that you are going to prove yourself useful to our cause." Edgar was currently investigating the disappearance of several young women in town and was desperate for a lead. Desmond sent a note claiming to have information and wished to speak with the Duke here. However, Edgar quickly saw through his ploy. Of course, I know why you are here, but what kind of host would I be if I didn't at least offer you a drink? Forgive me, but you seem to be sweating an awful lot. Desmond looked around, silently wondering if the great hall was too warm. I am not here for a drink. Let me tell you. Edgar grabbed the Baron's neck, not caring about the crowd, watching his every move. I have about as much patience for time wasters as I do for criminals. If I discover that you've only invited me here to trot me out in front of your guests, I will see to it you hang first thing in the morning. I'm sorry, Desmond cried, as his feet started to dangle from being lifted off the ground. He heard the Duke was a monster, but always thought the stories were exaggerated. Desmond tried to gulp, but Edgar's hand was too tight around his neck. Sorry? Edgar tightened the grip around Desmond's neck. Sounds like you are useless after all. It wouldn't take too long for me to break the neck of such a slender, weak old man. Would that be entertaining enough for your guests? He whispered in the Baron's ear. Desmond felt the hairs on his body stand tall as Edgar's cold breath blew against his skin. I have information, I swear it. Utty, it's upstairs. Good boy. Edgar dropped the Baron, but delivered a swift kick to his stomach to prove one final point. Why did you wait so long to say that? Do you have a death wish? No, Duke. I should have brought it right away. Forgive me. Can we put a stop to this, please? I don't want people to get the wrong impression of you, Desmond pleaded, desperate to save what little dignity remained after being strangled in front of the entire party. Of course. Edgar released the small man. In the meantime, I'll need a moment to have a smoke. Alone. The garden has been made off limits. You are welcome to enjoy your cigar out there, but, Your Grace, my daughter wishes to have a moment with you. If you could only spend a moment outside with her, I would appreciate it. Do I look like a shooting star to you, Baron? Edgar looked down at the short, old man before him. Desmond was completely puzzled. Shooting star? I do not understand, Edgar. How could you be a shooting star? You seem to think I am in the business of granting wishes. Run along and bring what information you have for me. Yes, sir. Edgar made a mental note that this would be the last house call he did under the king's orders. The Baron was nothing more than an opportunist, using Edgar's name and status to get a crowd to attend his party. Before anyone else could introduce their daughters to him, Edgar picked a random direction to go in hopes it would be the garden. He had never visited the Baron's home before, and quite frankly, wanted this to be the last. Follow after him. He heard someone mutter behind him. Edgar pulled a cigar out of his coat pocket as he hurried outside. He knew the night would call for some relief. As he found his way out of the Baron's home, the cold air nipped at his skin, almost forcing him back inside. Realizing that he'd rather be freezing and alone than warm in the company of desperate potential mothers-in-law, he lit his cigar. I should have brought 2 coats, he mumbled to himself. Passing by the stairs where he was standing, Edgar spotted a young woman hurrying off somewhere as she hugged a coat to protect her from the cold. That's a little thin for this weather, isn't it? He made his presence known. The woman halted, seemingly shaken up due to the fact that someone had caught her wandering around. The party is inside. I am very much aware of that, Alessandra. Why are you tensing up like I don't know who you are? Who else would be wearing a mask in the Baron's home except for his supposedly cursed daughter? After a moment of silence, Alessandra finally spoke. Are you scared of me? No, I have seen much scarier things in my day. Why should I be scared of a simple mask? Edgar blew out smoke into the air. That's going to kill you if you don't stop. Alessandra didn't need to turn around to see that he was smoking. The scent reached her nose, and she found it to be disgusting. Good, it'll speed up the process. Are you scared of me? He asked after she had not once looked around to see who she was speaking to. I don't know who you are, to be honest, she replied. Right. I am Edgar Collins, Edgar would be fine. The Duke? Alessandra's eyes widened. She never expected such a man would be here. She thought her father was lying. They say you are to be married. Is that why you are here? You are here for my sister? I would rather die. No offense, he added. None of the young women in there shall be my wife. They are all like matching dolls in a set. What about me? If I were to ask you to marry me, what would you say? Alessandra nervously waited for his answer. What none of you seem to understand is the fact you would be setting yourself up for a loveless marriage if I were to pick you. I was never interested in marrying at all. Yet the rumor has its hooks in half the town by now, Edgar said. What if it's not love that I'm after? Edgar chuckled. Most marriages these days didn't start off with love, but the feelings always found their way in. There's no guarantee that one of us wouldn't fall for the other over time. What about a contract? Alessandra proposed an idea. She was desperate for any hope of escaping her father's home. Edgar was extremely suspicious of Alessandra's eagerness. Did your father set this up? My father has no idea that I am out here speaking to you. Duke Edgar, I have told you the party is on the inside. No one was supposed to see me passing by. In fact, my father will be furious if he learns that you and I spoke. Alessandra replied earnestly. Desmond was known to keep his daughter hidden away from the world. Alessandra wasn't of any use to him, thanks to her disfigurement and the rumors surrounding it. This offer has nothing to do with helping my father. I leave it up to you to believe me. I am not interested in marrying anyone for love. I only wish to leave this place and never look back. What is it? Is your father marrying you off to some filthy old or perhaps just shipping you to the other side of the country? Has to be something drastic for you to ask a man you don't know to marry you. Edgar pressed his cigar against the stone wall to end it. I am dying within these walls day by day, piece by piece. I am neglected and unloved by my own father. I do not care for your looks, Duke Edgar, nor your money. Frankly, I see you as an escape, she explained. Alessandra knew she had to take advantage of their encounter. This might be her only chance at getting out of this miserable castle. I've heard the king wishes for you to get married. You seem to have very little romantic interest in a wife, and I could be a fitting choice. Our goals may be aligned here. We'll never expect love from one another, and never be responsible for each other outside of marital duties. Is this agreeable? Edgar had finally started to believe Alessandra. Still, he wasn't looking to entertain the idea of being married to her just yet. It isn't hard for me to find an actress to play the role of my wife. If it was so easy, you would have done so already, Alessandra said, seeing through his bluff. He most likely needed a wife who would make sense to the king. If the king has done this to toy with you, choosing a wife like me will surely drive him crazy. The corners of Edgar's mouth lifted. You're much quicker on your feet than I expected. The rumors about your timidity and reclusive nature are clearly false. Alessandra didn't break his gaze, as if daring him to look away first. And you are said to be a monster, but you seem human to me. I do what I must to survive. If my terms are not agreeable, I shall leave you be, Alessandra said as she took a step toward the door, waiting for an answer. When Edgar didn't respond, she took another step. Just as she got to the door, he spoke up. Meet me at my residence tomorrow. We will discuss this further, and then I will give you my answer. Alessandra couldn't believe he was actually considering it, but did her best to hide her excitement. Your residence? You know, I don't usually travel that far from home. Then consider it a test. I want to see how serious you are. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to retire for the evening to muse over our conversation. I bid you good evening, Miss Alessandra Barrett. Hopefully, we shall see each other soon. Edgar turned on his heel and began making his way back inside to say his goodbyes to the Baron. Alessandra felt a rush of anxiety at the thought of seeing him again tomorrow. At least he seemed to be taking her seriously. We shall see each other tomorrow, she whispered to herself, watching him go. Duke Edgar, who are you speaking to? Kate Barrett, the younger daughter of the Baron, stepped outside. She heard the Duke was all alone and thought to give him some company. Seeing him wrap up a conversation with her half-sister made her blood boil. Kate thought highly of herself and used her good looks to charm anyone she could. Her blonde hair and blue eyes mirrored her mother's, and Kate truly believed she was the most eligible bachelorette in the land. Dressed like a doll, Kate was hoping to have a word with the Duke and catch his interest. She begged her father to have a moment alone with the Duke, but Alessandra had stolen it away from her. I hope she did not offend you, Duke Edgar, Kate said, as she glared at Alessandra. She's not supposed to be out here. Edgar eyed her up and down, unimpressed. She has not offended me, unlike your father. Thank goodness, she answered before adding in a whisper, the girl is not well. Edgar raised an eyebrow. Forgive me, but isn't Alessandra your older sibling? Shouldn't you be referring to her as your sister, or at the very least, her name? Edgar could sense the animosity Kate had for her sister right away. Seeing the Duke speaking to her sister, Alessandra used this chance to run away before any of them would ask her to speak. She wished Kate would have stayed inside rather than come out. Now that Kate knew she had spoken to the Duke, all hell would break loose tomorrow. You are correct, Duke Edgar, of course, Kate said, with feigned innocence. I love my older sister, but as you can see, she is extremely shy. That is why I was concerned she might have offended you. Kate didn't want to ruin her chances of marrying Edgar, and knew she had to say all the right things to get on his good side. You know, Duke, I was hoping for some alone time between the two of us, she said, placing a finger lightly on his chest. A man of your position and a woman of my beauty could make a powerful union, don't you agree? Edgar sighed, annoyed that she couldn't take the hint he was uninterested. Is there some misconception that I am looking for a wife who can only please me and... Oh, I'm sorry, Kate said. Caught off guard, there were plenty of men who would jump at her advances. Understand this, Kate? Edgar said with a groan. As hard as it might be for you to believe, not all men are so susceptible to the fluttering of your eyelashes. Besides, I've received another more promising offer. Now, if you'll excuse me. Edgar turned and retreated into the house, leaving Kate utterly humiliated. I can't believe I got caught, Alessandra muttered to herself as she leaned up against a tree far out of anyone's sight. She knew the affections Kate held for Duke Edgar, and should have known her sister would have come looking for him. Alessandra could only pray that Kate had heard nothing from their conversation, for she knew that Kate would not hesitate to spread rumors and gossip. Please don't let that be the case. Alessandra wished she could have stayed to hear what the Duke and Kate were talking about. Would Edgar tell her about Alessandra's proposal? Would they laugh at her expense? However, from their brief conversation, Edgar didn't seem like a man to joke around and make a fool of someone. Alessandra reasoned that he would not have invited her to his home if he was not serious. Her chances were still slim. But for the first time, Alessandra had a glimmer of hope. She took a deep breath, pushing any negative thoughts away. She would worry about everything else tomorrow, but as of right now, she was starving. Alessandra stepped away from the tree, running towards the back door of the kitchen. She took a look behind her to make sure she wasn't followed before opening the door. Inside was pandemonium. Overworked servers ran all around trying to get the guests their meals. Exhausted cooks wiped the sweat from their foreheads as orders were barked across the bustling room. Alessandra spotted her favorite cook and called to him as she maneuvered through the chaos. "Mario!" As she approached, he offered her a taste of the dish he was preparing. "It's a bit bland, don't you think?" Mario asked as she tasted it. Alessandra didn't know what he was talking about. It was fantastic. He smiled at the joyous look on her face and turned to speak to the other cook beside him. "Cover for me, I'll be right back," he said. He took Alessandra's hand and led her back outside. The Baron's wife had been unexpectedly visiting the kitchen lately, and the last thing Mario wanted was for her to catch Alessandra in there. When they were alone, Alessandra explained why she had risked coming into the kitchen in the first place. "I didn't mean to interrupt, Mario. It's just that no one had brought my dinner to my chamber, and I couldn't hold out any longer." Mario closed the door behind them, releasing Alessandra's hand. Now they were outside. "It's that witch, Katrina's fault. Just a month ago, they fired half the kitchen staff. Now they throw a party, and there's not enough of us to handle the job. What are they thinking?" "Duke Edgar Collins is looking for a wife," Alessandra said. "Haven't you heard?" Mario scoffed. "So that's the reason? Did they throw a party just for Kate to meet him? I can only imagine how poorly they must be getting along." Alessandra double-checked to make sure they were alone before whispering, "I spoke with him." Mario couldn't believe it. "The Duke? Spoke about what?" "I've heard stories that he's not the most pleasant man." Alessandra raised an eyebrow. "People tell stories about me as well. Do you believe them?" Mario went silent as he thought about all the terrible things people had said about Alessandra, though she always wore her mask in front of him, and he had never seen her real face. He certainly did not believe the rumors of her monstrosity. "Of course not," he said gently. "Then I shall give the Duke a fair chance. I can't tell you what I spoke to him about, but I will say I am hoping for some good news." Alessandra rested against a broken wall and looked out across the garden. "Is this concerning your escape plan?" Mario asked quietly. "I hope the Duke can help you run far away. It's a shame you can't go on your own because of the young girls disappearing." "I hope the culprit is found and the girls are still alive," Alessandra said. "I overheard your father claiming to know something about it when I delivered his coffee this morning. Can you believe it? I was hired to be a cook, but we're so short-staffed that I've been doubling as a maid. God forbid they compensate me for it." Mario kicked a small stone down the path in frustration. Alessandra watched as the stone rolled away. "When I leave, you should come with me. You have always been kind to me, and I wish to return the favor." "That is nice of you, but I still owe the Baron for the money I borrowed," Mario said with a sigh. "Another year, and it should be paid off. Then I will come find you. After all, Miss Alessandra, you are the only Barrett I can stand." They shared a smile before Alessandra grabbed his hand. "Mario, I need a favor. Two, actually. I'm not close to the coachman, but you are. Can you speak to him about taking me somewhere tomorrow without letting my family know about it?" "That won't be a problem," he answered. "I take it this trip has something to do with the Duke. Please be cautious, Alessandra. Even if you don't want to believe in the rumors about him, he is still a mysterious man with a long, spotted history. Alessandra nodded. Thank you for your advice, and I will be cautious. Plus, I always walk around with this. She took a small knife out from the pocket of her dress. Mario had stolen it a while ago and gave it to Alessandra as protection. If he tries anything with me, then bang! Mario stared unimpressed at the way Alessandra held the knife. Be reminded you are holding a knife, not a gun. What is the second favor you need? Food, please, Alessandra innocently smiled. Just then, another worker popped their head outside. Mario? Mario nodded, knowing their time was up. Right away, Miss Alessandra. I must get it before they kill me for being away so long. He dusted off his pants, took a deep breath, and returned to the chaos inside the kitchen. While Alessandra patiently waited for him to bring some food, she tapped her finger, following the rhythm of the faint music coming from inside the home. It was a song her father loved so much that he played it at every party he hosted. She closed her eyes to fantasize what it would be like dancing around to the music, enjoying small talk with other guests. What her life might be if she didn't have to hide behind a mask. A short while later, Mario returned with a small feast. I got you a little bit of everything, he said. Opening her eyes, Alessandra was met with the reality that she would probably never get to dance with strangers. No, her night would be spent alone with the kitten she recently found, eating her plate of leftovers in the confines of her room. What's the matter? Mario asked. Nothing, just thinking about life. Alessandra took the food and jug from him. She didn't want to keep him outside for much longer. 3 hours more to go, and then there will finally be peace. Mario could see the enormous pain she carried with her. Alessandra, it'll get better soon. I promise. Are you trying to give me that whole rainbow at the end of... No, definitely not. Mario stopped her from repeating the ridiculous phrase he hated. When was the last time you saw a rainbow in Lockwood? For the time I have spent in this town, I have never seen one. Let's say there'll be happiness when the next shipment of rum comes in. Mario smiled and gave her a wink before returning to his kitchen duties. Alessandra looked down at the food and drink before taking one final glance at the kitchen door. Time to head back, she said as she headed toward her room. The talk with Mario had definitely brightened her spirits, and she felt confident that tomorrow's meeting would go in her favor. Just then, Alessandra overheard an approaching maid muttering under her breath, "All of them are so rude. Why can't they get their own drinks? Get them yourself if you don't like the way I hold it." The maid was so angry that she turned back to raise a middle finger to the house, not noticing she was about to run into Alessandra. "You should watch your step," she cautioned the maid. Alessandra?" The maid gasped, taking a fearful step backward. Like many of the people who believed the ridiculous rumors, she was terrified that she'd fall dead on the spot if she were to see Alessandra's true face. "Please don't hurt me." "Hurt you?" Alessandra looked down at her hands. Unless she was going to start a food fight, there was no way she could hurt anyone. When would everyone start to think logically instead of believing rumors? "I am just doing my job. Don't kill me." The maid covered her eyes with her hands as her body shook with fear. Had she gone the other way, she would not have run into Alessandra. "Just trying to help. Katrina doesn't appreciate the staff talking about the guests." Alessandra swore that her stepmother had some kind of magic ability to hear whenever the staff complained about guests, and had caught them doing so on many occasions. It only fed into Alessandra's theory that Katrina was not from this world. Maybe she fell from the sky, or was summoned by a wicked ritual. Alessandra laughed to herself as she continued to her chamber. Alessandra passed to the area where she had stumbled upon Edgar, going to a door on the opposite side of the home from the kitchen. It led her to a room filled with gardening supplies, and on the inside was another door, taking her out to an empty hall. Her father did not enjoy his guests wandering around the house, other than where he had marked the party to be, in order to avoid gossip about the smallest thing. Alessandra skipped and twirled now that the music was louder. All she was missing was a fancy dress and a partner. To the left of where the party was going on was Alessandra's room. The hall to her bedroom was slightly dark as the fire in the lanterns was dying, since no one came to check on them. As she approached, she was greeted by a faint sound from the other side of the door. Meow. "Kitty," Alessandra said as she looked down at the orange tabby she found a short time earlier. "I told you not to come to the door. If someone else saw you, they would have taken you away." Alessandra used her right foot to gently nudge the kitten back inside of her room when it tried to run out. "It's safer in here, trust me, and I brought us food." With the kitten distracted and the door closed, Alessandra went to her desk so she could finally eat and put her rumbling stomach to rest. She placed the plate and jug on the desk first and then took a seat. All alone in her room with the kitten, Alessandra took off her mask to be free. No one around to recoil in fear, and no mirrors for her to see herself. The mask was set aside, and as she listened to the faint music creeping its way into her room, Alessandra ate in silence, eagerly waiting for the day to end so she could be one step closer to escaping this place. Before she knew it, the next morning arrived. "My lady, your breakfast," said a voice outside her door, followed by 3 knocks. Alessandra tossed in her bed. "How on earth is it morning already? I was just eating dinner," she grumbled, stretching as she woke up. Alessandra stared at the ceiling when she opened her eyes. Today was the day for her life to possibly change. "My lady, Kate's here," Alessandra realized. Normally the maid would just knock and leave quickly. This person was practically begging her to come to the door, which meant they wanted something. Kate's curiosity about what Alessandra spoke about with the Duke must have been bothering her all night long. Alessandra was tempted to make her half-sister wait longer, but today was not the day to piss off Kate. She needed to pretend like everything was normal. "I'm coming," she called back, to let her know she heard them. Alessandra took the sleeping kitten beside her and hid it in the closet. She closed the door and then went to her desk to put on the mask she had worn last night. My lady? Try to make it less obvious you are being pressured," Alessandra thought, once she heard the maid stutter. With the mask tied, Alessandra approached her door and unlocked it. "Your breakfast," the maid said, with her head down. Alessandra looked down at her breakfast, which wasn't in the maid's hands, but placed onto the floor. "Thank you." She went down to pick it up herself, but as her hands neared the floor, a shoe appeared from the left to pin down her left hand. "Good morning, sister." Kate appeared from the sidelines, just like Alessandra predicted. Alessandra winced from the pain of Kate's shoes on her knuckles. "Good morning, sister." "Run along," Kate ordered the maid. She was highly annoyed that she had to wait outside of Alessandra's bedroom for so long. If only she had the spare key her father took away. "Did you have fun last night, Alessandra?" "Yes." "Yes?" Kate became furious with how bold Alessandra was. "Just because you ran into the Duke, you think you had fun?" "Not that," Alessandra stuttered. "I had fun in my room last night. The music reached my room." "Is that so? Tell me, what did you discuss with the Duke last night?" Kate said hastily. She was desperate to confirm with her own ears that nothing serious had happened between the Duke and Alessandra. I did not notice he was standing there as I was going to collect my dinner. He called out my name as I forgot to address someone as important as the Duke. He scolded me, and then you arrived. That is all. Kate pressed her shoe against the back of Alessandra's hand harder, not fully believing the story. What else? He spoke about getting married, and you as an option. Nothing more. I swear, Alessandra cried out from the pain. Kate lifted her foot. It made more sense Edgar would speak about her. But why on earth was he playing so hard to get last night when the two of them walked back into the party? Of course he would speak about me. Why else would he talk to the freak? Alessandra rolled her eyes as Kate continued. Still, it angers me that you showed your disgusting face to the Duke. What if he were to believe he is cursed and takes his anger out on us? What will you do then? Do you think you'll be safe? Kate pushed her shoe against Alessandra's hand again. No, Alessandra whimpered. Then stay in your bedroom. Kate, Desmond exclaimed upon seeing his youngest daughter hurting his oldest. Stop it right this instant. But father, Kate trailed off, realizing there was no use in denying what he clearly saw. The Duke saw her last night and they spoke. Desmond looked surprised, as the Duke hadn't mentioned running into his eldest daughter before saying goodbye. Never mind that, Kate. Let her go at once. Kate removed her foot from Alessandra's hand and then stomped on the floor like a toddler. Remember your place, freak, she hissed to Alessandra before storming off. Alessandra's hand trembled in pain, but she felt relieved Kate was gone. Even with the injury, Alessandra took up the tray of food to take back into her room. Alessandra, sweetheart, the Baron inched closer to his daughter. Can you tell me what happened between you and the Duke last night? Why were you out of your bedroom? You know there was a party. No food came last night, and I was hungry. The garden is off limits, so I thought I could run by quickly. That is all, said Alessandra. Desmond understood that, but still, this was the Duke they were talking about. Many people believed the rumor about her cursing someone and making them die, all because of a coincidence. What did you talk about? Alessandra kept her head down low and said he only wanted to make sure he could smoke there, and talked about Kate as a marriage candidate. Really? Desmond's eyes lit up at this. He was worried Kate had not seduced the Duke last night, but now it seemed she had an effect on Edgar after all. That man is so strange he probably wants to observe her a little longer. This is good. Edgar was someone Desmond needed to help him crawl out of the debt he buried himself in. It wasn't easy to live as grand as he used to, with his finances decreasing over the years. Kate finding a rich husband was their only hope. Still, you should not have gone out. What if I would have changed my mind and taken a few people out there? So I should starve? Alessandra thought. I am sorry, father, she replied. Fine. Fine. There's absolutely no point in scolding you. Whoever did not bring your food is to blame. I'm sorry about what Kate did, but she's just looking out for the family. Desmond was worried, but since Edgar mentioned nothing, he assumed it meant that Alessandra had not offended him. You must be bored in your room all the time. Let me get you some entertainment. Name anything, and I shall fetch it right away. Since you asked, I have run out of things to paint. I wish to paint the town. Can I ride around in the carriage to see places to paint? I won't get out, I promise. Desmond placed his hand on his hip, as this wasn't something Katrina would agree with. However, if they kept Alessandra locked away, she would try to leave her bedroom more. It was best to give her a little bit of freedom. After what Kate just did, he had to do something to make it up to her. Promise me you won't leave the carriage. "I promise," Alessandra grinned. Back at his estate, Edgar was enjoying a much better morning than Alessandra. "Young master, I have brought your breakfast," the butler, Alfred, said as he entered Edgar's study with a tray. He found it odd Edgar was not seated at his desk as he normally would. Instead, Edgar was peering out his window, which had a clear view of the entrance of his home. Alfred placed the tray down on the desk and straightened it out before turning around to see if there was anything else Edgar would need. Unfortunately, it did not seem like Edgar realized he was even there. "Young master," Alfred called out again. "Good morning, Alfred." Edgar looked away from the window to Alfred, standing behind him. "Thank you for breakfast." "Are you expecting guests? Should I prepare breakfast for them or have drinks prepared?" Alfred figured that was the reason Edgar was staring out the window. The only person Edgar did this for was his mother, but it wasn't due to him being excited about her visit. Instead, Edgar did this to see who was tagging along with his mother, so he would know to abruptly leave home. "I am honestly not sure. I gave her the invitation, but it is not certain she will arrive unless she is truly desperate." Edgar went back to looking out his window. He was curious to see if Alessandra really would visit him. She was never seen out in public, so her coming all the way here to make a marriage contract with him was intriguing. A woman visiting? In broad daylight? Alfred was utterly surprised. Edgar frowned, turning to look at Alfred once again. "What are you trying to say, Alfred? That I'm some kind of—" "Yes," Alfred bowed. Edgar couldn't believe Alfred had answered honestly. Had it been anyone else, Edgar would have fired them. But Alfred was a long-time friend and father figure. "I am not. Please refrain from saying such a thing if the guest is to arrive. She might become the lady of this house." "What?" Alfred had to hold onto the desk to stop himself from falling. Edgar stared unamused at Alfred's dramatic reaction. "Why are you acting like it's such a surprise I would get a wife?" After a brief moment, Alfred recollected himself since he needed to get the truth. "Your exact words when the king suggested you marry where I'm never getting married. I would rather jump from the roof and die." "Maybe I misinterpreted those words. I apologize." "Alfred, I sincerely believe I inherited my dramatic nature from you. I am not interested in marriage, but the woman I met last night was intriguing, a perfect way to piss off the king and ward off some people from around me." "I do not understand," said Alfred. "How would the lady coming piss off the king and ward off others?" "It will be self-explanatory if she arrives today. If a Barrett comes to visit me, let them in. Not the father," Edgar added since he could not stand the man. "Barrett, is it Kate?" Alfred spoke softly. She wasn't what Alfred had in mind, to be Edgar's wife, nor did he see how intriguing she was. "Did you drink at the party last night, Edgar?" "No, I only had a quick smoke break," Edgar replied, leaving the window to see what Alfred brought him for breakfast. "Smoke? Excuse me, I shall check all your cigars," Alfred bowed, ready to leave the room to check Edgar's supply. "What the for?" Edgar looked to Alfred for an explanation. "If you find Kate Barrett to be intriguing—" "Are you crazy?" Edgar stopped Alfred in his tracks. "The Baron has another daughter. Alessandra Barrett is the older one." "Thank goodness." Alfred held his chest and sighed. "You are aware of the rumors concerning her, right?" Edgar believed Alfred shouldn't be so relieved yet. "Anyone is better than Kate in my book. If that younger girl were to become your wife, I would finally retire after 40 years. We are not so sure Alessandra will even arrive. When was the last time you—" A knock at the door interrupted Alfred. He opened the door to find a maid with a terrified expression hand him a paper before going back to her duty. Alfred closed the door as he read the paper. "It appears we are in for a surprise. Alessandra Barrett is here and wishes to have an audience with you." Edgar was pleasantly surprised to hear she had arrived already, or even that she had come at all. "Invite her to my study." "Yes, young master." Alfred bowed, then proceeded to do as he was told. "Stop bowing so much, Alfred. You are not a priest," Edgar said as Alfred left the room. "Alessandra Barrett. What an interesting person you are." Edgar wanted to judge if the Baron truly had nothing to do with Alessandra wanting to get married. Their meeting wouldn't have been that coincidental. As he told the Baron he was going out to smoke, and then Alessandra magically appeared. The only thing making Edgar believe this might be a coincidence was the Baron not sending his younger daughter. Meanwhile, Alessandra exited the carriage her father gave for her to ride around for the day. Luckily, Mario had spoken to the coachman, and then nothing about this visit was to be mentioned to her father. If the coachman showed any signs of betraying what he promised, Alessandra didn't mind playing into the rumors about herself to threaten the man. "This is huge," Alessandra commented as she looked around the entrance of the Duke's estate. It was no wonder why he was the biggest catch to get married to. The man was filthy rich. "Good morning," she said as armored men walked past her. "Good morning," they replied in unison. Alessandra was surprised they had not flinched when they looked at her mask. At least the guards here are not afraid of stupid rumors, she thought. Moments later, the large doors of Edgar's home opened up, revealing a man in butler clothes. "Welcome, Alessandra Barrett. The Duke is expecting you," Alfred greeted the young woman. He did not react to her mask and made sure not to stare at it, since the action would be rude. He made a mental note to tell the other workers to do the same. "Good morning. It's nice to meet you," Alessandra said as she approached Alfred. She held out her hand to properly greet the man when she stood in front of him. Alfred shook her hand happily. It was rare for many of Edgar's guests to greet him like this, but Alessandra did it without a second thought. "Come, I shall lead the way." Alessandra felt unable to breathe when she entered the Duke's home for the first time. The Duke appeared to be a collector of many paintings Alessandra wished she could get her hands on. "I'm sorry, I did not get your name," Alessandra said after she noticed she had not asked for the butler's name. "Alfred," he replied. "Nice to meet you, Alfred." Alessandra smiled. "He is in here." Alfred knocked on the door and then opened it for Alessandra to walk in. He did not know how Edgar and Alessandra got to the point of wanting to marry each other, but Alfred was starting to like the young woman. "Thank you," Alessandra told Alfred before entering the room. She felt her heart skip a beat when the door closed behind her, and Alfred had not come in behind her. "I wasn't expecting you to show up, but if you did, breakfast time was not my guess." Edgar sat at his desk, watching her every move. He began to inspect the type of person Alessandra was. "Why? Are you embarrassed by people seeing me? Should I have snuck in at night like a thief?" Alessandra responded without thinking. "I suppose coming at night would have made my men think you were a criminal. And why would I have invited you to my home if I were embarrassed by you? Take a seat." Edgar pointed to the free chair on the other side of his desk. "I am extremely curious to know how you were able to leave your father's home when it is said you never leave. Did you play a trick on your father, or did he let you out willingly?" As Alessandra was taking a seat, she digested Edgar's words carefully. "I am not working with my father, if that's what you're trying to find out. In fact, I took a great risk being here today, and you must know that I'm extremely serious about this. There is no going back for me." "Does your father hate you?" Edgar bluntly asked. There was no point in beating around the bush when what they were here to discuss was serious. Alessandra thought about it before giving her answer. I don't think my father hates me. He is ashamed of me. Who would want a daughter with a reputation like mine in a world like this? It is a parent's job to love their child no matter what. It's a shame you were born as a baron's daughter. You would have been loved elsewhere. To Edgar, it was only people with wealth who cared to distance themselves from someone, all because of their reputation. If I were the daughter of farmers, they would have rightfully cast me aside to sell their crops. Why would something so drastic happen to a farmer's daughter for her to end up wearing a mask? Whatever you are hiding, it was done because you are a baron's daughter, right? Asked Edgar. High society is quite competitive. Edgar was well aware of the things young women do to others they were jealous of. Alessandra was no doubt in the line of someone's jealousy. Yes, Alessandra gave up since he was right. It all happened due to her being a baron's daughter. Someone must have been really jealous of you, Alessandra. Fine, let's say I believe this is all you're planning, and your father is not involved. Why would someone who has lived a vast majority of their life in hiding wanted to marry someone who has the spotlight on them? Truthfully, I didn't plan on asking you to marry me. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. I need an escape plan, and my only option is marriage. I never pictured that person to be as grand as you, but you fulfill all the criteria. Edgar raised an eyebrow. The criteria? I need to consider 3 things, Duke Edgar. 1, you are a private person, so there would be no need for me to mingle with many people. 2, I can ward off people from coming around you. Lastly, you are capable of controlling my family. That might be the most important, and it seems like you're the only one who could succeed, she explained. Before falling asleep last night, Alessandra thought critically of the benefits of marrying Edgar. If she were to bring someone below her father's status, her father and stepmother could easily push that person away, and Alessandra would have to stay caged up. Now, if a man like Edgar were to come asking for her hand in marriage, her father could hardly object to it. Her main objective was to get away from her home, and she needed Duke Edgar to achieve her goal. Duke Edgar weighed her words carefully. It is true that I like to keep to myself, but there are few parties I need to attend, whether it is hosted by family, friends, or work-related. Am I to show up without my wife? It would be boring if you hid all the time, said Edgar. He was not looking to have his wife be a prisoner. You are misunderstanding something, Duke Edgar. I never hid because I wanted to. I did what I was told to in order to survive. I would love to go out and view the town, attend parties, and dance around. I might not have the experience, and my confidence might need to increase. But I do not wish to live in the shadows anymore. She looked right into his eyes as she made this confession. Alessandra did not care to mingle with too many people not important to Edgar. Instead, she wanted to go out and start enjoying her life. Edgar made a humming sound as he contemplated something. A week ago, I would have never entertained this conversation with you, but I'm in the mood to play games. He placed a piece of paper on his desk. What is this? Alessandra asked as she looked at the paper with fancy designs on the edges. A contract marriage needs to have rules and conditions, right? Edgar pushed the paper, a pen, and ink toward her. Let's get started. Alessandra's eyes widened as she realized he had officially accepted her proposal for them to get married. Isn't this a little too easy? I expected him to grill me some more, she thought, but she was also relieved. There was no going back for her. What are you waiting for? Edgar asked when she continued to stare at the paper without doing anything. Sorry. Alessandra reached for the paper and pen. She gasped when Edgar grabbed her hand before she could touch the paper. "What happened to your hand?" Edgar spotted the bruising around her knuckles. Glancing at her other hand, he saw that it was perfectly fine. "Did you punch something or did someone hurt you?" "It's nothing." Alessandra pulled her hand out of his grasp. "It is something seeing that you will be my future wife. I don't take too kindly to someone hurting my people. Name the person, and I shall have them punished," said Edgar. Now that they were going to be husband and wife, her problems became his. "It was an accident, Duke Edgar." "Just Edgar is fine." Edgar decided to leave the topic for now, but he would get back to it. He didn't like the feeling he got as he thought about the life Alessandra had. "I will try my best. Based on our conversations, no love shall be the first condition," Alessandra stated as she wrote down the first rule. "How do I know that you won't fall in love with me over time?" Edgar assessed her. Alessandra looked up from the paper to Edgar. He was a handsome man, but that was all. She knew nothing about him, and frankly, if she was not so desperate to leave her father's home, she would have never talked to a man like Edgar. "Trust me, you are not my type, Edgar." So there is a type. Edgar, for some reason, wondered what kind of man moved her heart. "I was hidden away, but I'm not blind. What should the second condition be?" Alessandra asked so that they could move on from the love topic. "This needs to stay our secret. The only person who can know that this isn't a real love marriage is my butler Alfred. He shall be a shield for you in dangerous times," said Edgar. "Sounds good." Alessandra saw no issue in that. "I must ask that I am able to keep my mask on until I feel comfortable walking around without it on. That is your business. Do whatever you wish. I must insist that we sleep in the same room." "Why are you looking so surprised? Did you honestly think I wouldn't sleep with my wife?" Edgar tilted his head slightly as he awaited her answer. Alessandra thought they wouldn't share the same bed, but as he said, she would be his wife even though a contract was involved. "I suppose that makes sense. It is something couples do, after all." Just talking about this made Alessandra blush. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop it from happening. "Everyone does it, young or old," Edgar said while grabbing the pen from Alessandra. Their hands and shoulders touched, causing a strange sensation from Alessandra. "Young? How young?" Alessandra asked after clearing her throat. Edgar only now realized she had misunderstood what he meant. "Sleeping, Alessandra. I was referring to just sleeping. However, if you wish for something more..." Alessandra was now red as a tomato. "No, sleeping is just fine." Alessandra looked back down at the paper, feeling completely embarrassed for thinking he meant something else. Thankfully, she was saved by Alfred's knocking. "Sir, there's another guest who requests an audience," Alfred said to Edgar as quietly as possible. He clearly did not want Alessandra to overhear, but it only made Alessandra more intrigued. Edgar looked utterly confused. "Another guest? At this time? Who is it?" Alfred side-eyed Alessandra. "It's a woman, sir." This confused Edgar even more. Women didn't usually come to his house, especially not in broad daylight. "Send her away. Tell her I am busy with my future wife," Edgar announced. It was a little louder now. Hearing this, Alessandra couldn't help but beam. He had really chosen her, but Alfred didn't move. He looked at Edgar with a gloomy expression as he spoke. "I've tried to tell her, but she says you want her here, and that she is supposed to be your wife." Now, Alessandra was getting worried. "Edgar, did you invite another woman here so we could fight for your hand in marriage?" Duke Edgar shook his head. "I would never do such a thing." "You know what, Alfred? Send her up so Alessandra can see that this is all just a misunderstanding. Alfred didn't think this was a good idea, but he knew better than to disobey. Edgar didn't know what to expect from the situation, and Alessandra was extremely nervous. She couldn't lose this deal, not after she's come this far. Moments later, a brunette walked into the room. Edgar squinted, somewhat remembering her, but he clearly didn't know her name. "What are you doing here?" Edgar asked. "You don't even remember my name, do you? It's Angelica, but I'm sure you'll never forget me after today." Angelica turned to the side and revealed her pregnant belly. Everybody in the room gasped. Angelica turned back to Edgar. "Yes, you are the father." Edgar was momentarily lost for words, but he eventually found them. "How can you be sure the child is mine?" "You're the only one I had relations with. Not everyone sleeps around as much as you," Angelica said with a sly grin. Edgar did not know how to handle this situation. Alfred hated to see his young master suffer like this, so he jumped in. "What do you want, Angelica?" "Well, since I'm carrying your heir, it only makes sense that I become your wife," Angelica said confidently. Duke Edgar nodded, still in shock. "I suppose that makes sense. I should marry the woman carrying my child." Alessandra felt like she was going to faint. She was losing this deal. She couldn't go back home now. Her father would find out what she'd done, and she would lose his support. He was the only reason why her stepmother hadn't killed her. Without her father's support, Alessandra was facing a slow, torturous death by her stepmother. "Duke Edgar, I thought you were smarter than that. Do you just believe this random woman off the street? How do you know she wasn't paid by someone to pretend? What if the king put her up to this to force you to marry?" Alessandra spoke loudly and confidently, commanding the room. She had to do whatever she could to save this contract marriage. Alfred chimed in. "Sir, Alessandra is right. The timing of this is a bit suspicious, don't you think?" Duke Edgar started pacing. "I suppose so." Alessandra knew she had a chance to change his mind, so she continued. "If you marry her, you have no control. You're at the mercy of the king, merely an object in his game. If you marry me, we can play this game on our terms." Angelica was furious about Alessandra's words. "Why would you want to marry this ugly woman who has to hide her face? I heard she is dangerous as well. Do you want to risk your life?" Duke Edgar looked back and forth between the two women. He didn't want to walk into a trap, but who should he believe? "So, Duke Edgar, what will it be?" Alessandra said, trying not to sound as terrified as she actually was. Will Duke Edgar marry Alessandra? What will happen to Alessandra if her plan fails? Will she be killed? What secrets does Alessandra hide behind her mask? Will her mysterious past destroy her future with Edgar?
To listen to the full audio series, install the Pocket FM app now.
Pocket FM. Download the